Welcome back to the Fanspeak Network and another episode of Sibling Showdowns. Just me today for a quick strategy episode. Again, we're trying to do a strategy series as well. So as you know, on the Fanspeak Network, every single week we have 4 to 5 live drafts every single week, but we're also going to be mixing in a lot more strategy shows each week because that's important too. Yes, we talk about strategy during the draft, but it's important to talk about just key points that we want to emphasize. Last week, we talked, Steve and I talked about offensive coordinator changes, 1 hour, 13 offensive coordinator changes, and Steve's top 5 offensive coordinator changes and impacts. Check that out on the channel. I believe it's episode 67. So yeah, we are going to be doing a lot of strategy shows too, because that's important. And today, what I want to talk about is an article I wrote back, I believe in May, right as the best ball season was kicking off. And it was basically like a lessons learned from last season. What I did wrong and I'm wanting to learn lessons and improve, what I did right and what I want to continue. So there's 7 key points that I want to focus on from that article, and I'm going to pull it up over on fanspeak.com. So let's see here. It's already pulled up. Sorry. So anyways, if you go to fanspeak.com, again, all of our articles are free. Yes, there will be ads, but if you get the Ultimate GM subscription, you will have an ads-free version. We will be adding some other best ball features behind the Ultimate GM paywall soon. So check that out. But as you can see, if you just go to the best ball tab, everything's kind of organized there. It's like a best ball headquarters with rankings and articles and the shows. And I have it broken out into different like hubs. So under strategy series, we first have 2023, and let me blow this up a little bit more. 2023 lessons to improve. And it's a picture of Nick Chubb. Why is it a picture of Nick Chubb? Well, the first lesson I want to work on is number 1, limit my heavy exposure to high capital players. I don't mind making big stands in best ball last year. I had 50% plus Sam Laporta. Obviously that paid off for me big time. But the later you get in drafts, I'm more comfortable being heavier on players, heavier exposure on players. So each round I'm comfortable kind of expanding that exposure. But in the first, 1 to 4 rounds, I want to be very cognizant because I had 20+% Nick Chubb in rounds 1 and 2, and probably 35% Mike Williams in round 4. So the combination of those two, and some of those obviously I had in the same lineup and they were just all totally dead. But the combination of those two players going down at such high exposure with such early draft capital was really hard. And, I still had a 27% advance rate on underdog. So it was great. But, I just think about what those injuries did to some really good lineups. And so I just want to be a little more cautious of that. It's hard when you're really high on a player in the first 4 rounds, right? You want, like right now, I'm really overweight Garrett Wilson in the first round because at the end of drafts, whether I have like the 8th pick or the 12th pick, if he's there at 12, I'm taking him and sometimes I'm even taking him 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have really high exposure to Garrett Wilson. That's something I'm going to have to like pull back on a little bit, even though I am so high on him, just because I want to limit heavy exposure on high capital players. So that really my rule is going to be for the first 3, 4 rounds. I really, really want to just make sure that I don't go too overweight on the exposure there. And then again, I can expand it as each round goes. And, I'm not concerned about late round, like last 3 rounds. If I'm really high on a guy, that's okay, because again, they're late round picks. So, but obviously late round picks are not a safe bet. So you probably want to be rotating that exposure too. But if you do have a high, really gut instinct or a strong lean, or just you want to make a major stand on a late round player that you feel good about, do it. Again, it paid off for me for Sam Laporta. So I'm comfortable doing it, the further down the draft and in the late rounds. But in the early rounds, I just want to be a little more cautious about my exposure. Number 2, avoid dead roster spots, especially at running back. I know Peter Overzet did early in best ball season a video about the different months and how to draft and different strategies you can lean into. And I know we're all kind of, playing around with some zero RB builds and wide receiver heavy, obviously. And that's kind of, the nature of things right now. But I do think leaning even heavier into the zero RB when you're taking shots on these kind of handcuff running backs, number 2 running backs. It does, as he said in the video, makes a little more sense in August when we actually know the news like we knew about Kyren Williams last August. So, I'm going to be saving plenty of drafts for August, and I want those drafts to be based on the news. So I might lean a little heavier into the 0 RB, then draft more like the 6 running backs, where I'm having to hammer some later ones that are the running back 2. I want to have that information correct. So I just want to try to avoid the dead roster spots at running back. Number 3, avoid third wide receiver, either a third wide receiver or 4th or 5th in targets on bad offenses or low volume offenses. It's one thing if it's a good offense. I've taken Tyler Boyd before in the past and on Bengals, that's a good offense. But, if you're, and I don't even know that you would consider him, maybe he was 4th, but not 5th. They hadn't really targeted their tight end a lot in the last year or 2. But, if you're taking a guy that's 5th or 6th in targets, and the 3rd tight end on a low volume passing offense, think about the Bears last year. That's a low volume passing offense with Justin Fields rushing so much. You're taking like the 4th, 5th, 6th target there. I just, even late, it's hard to see how you're going to get a lot of spike weeks and get a lot out of that. So I just want to be more careful about that. I said I had too much exposure last year on Giants and Panthers, not named Adam Thielen, Commanders and Ravens that weren't the alpha receiver. So again, my questions I'm always going to ask myself, is this a good offense? Check yes or no. Is this a high volume passing offense? And if the answer is no to both questions, then it needs to be a pass if they're way down the board. And finally, number 4, mixed quarterback styles. This actually just came up in a live draft with Steve. Check out our recent Sylvian Showdown, where I didn't know if we had a lot of ceiling. We waited on quarterback, and I was happy with that strategy. But then, the 3 quarterbacks we ended up with, I don't know if we had a lot of ceiling. We're really counting on Bryce Young to kind of break out in that particular build as the 3rd quarterback. But I do like mixing quarterback styles because too often, and I do like 3 quarterback builds, and I am not shy to do some where I wait until, the mid to late rounds to take my first quarterback. And yeah, sometimes you're going to get very pocket passers. Like this draft I did with Steve, we started with Kirk Cousins. I don't mind that, but I would like to, in hindsight, I would have liked to add like a Will Levis or Drake May with some rushing upside into that portfolio of quarterbacks. So if I'm drafting 3 quarterbacks, I want to at least draft like at least one that maybe offers more of a ceiling, probably because they have a little more dual threat ability. Okay, now I'm going to bring over the things I did right and the things I want to do more often. So let's bring that over and discuss that. So we're going to start with what you hear me talk about pretty much every live draft, and that's 3 QB builds. It's kind of but it's kind of feels like it's, still not the norm, even with back-to-back years of a lot of quarterback injuries, or I believe we had between 65 and 68 quarterbacks start the last 2 years, either due to injuries or inefficiencies. Part of it's for that, and protecting just floor weeks in general. I mean, really the only quarterbacks that were providing you a super safe, floor were like the Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen's of the world. And then they definitely obviously have more injury risk. So, people, I feel like it's funny to me that people in, the 0 RB world want to talk about, well, this running back could get injured, this running back could get injured, and then all these, like RB2s we're looking at. Well, a lot of these quarterbacks could get injured too, especially that are putting themselves out there running. And it doesn't seem like the fantasy community really wants to talk about that as much. Like, it's like, well, why would you, that's his upside. And, you don't want to talk about like the downside, but you look at Lamar Jackson, ignore his rookie year, which he came in halfway through and was great. And they knew they had something, but, then since then, 5 years since, he had 2 MVP seasons, 2 seasons on IR. 1 season is just good, great, 2020. So, you got to take the good with the bad with rushing quarterbacks. And believe me, I am taking my share of all the rushing quarterbacks. But I'm still doing 3 quarterback builds with them because I'm sorry, but yes, whether it's guys like Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins who popped their Achilles, or Joe Burrow who had the wrist injury, or the rushing quarterbacks who, Jalen Hurts played all year, but was clearly playing banged up at the end of the year. And then of course Anthony Richardson, who we saw the potential, but gets injured so early in the season. I want to build 3 quarterback builds again to protect for the injuries and floor weeks. But I also am building the 3 quarterback builds for playoffs. And I do think 3 quarterbacks do help my advance rate, and I want to continue that. But I also love that in the playoffs, I have 3 stack options because I'm obviously stacking my quarterbacks. So I like that in the playoffs, I have 3 quarterback stack options. We don't know who's going to go off each week. We'd love to be able to predict week 15 is this, week 16 is this, week 17 is that. We don't know. And if you look at the past couple of years, look at the finals the past 2 years. Last year, Lamar was one who was a top quarterback, but the guy who won had won with Jordan Love stack. That was a mid to late round quarterback. The year prior, Pat Kareem won with a quarterback combo that went on. Well, he had 2 at 3. He had Tua, Daniel Jones, and Tom Brady. He happened to have both the quarterbacks, Daniel Jones and Tom Brady, that went off that week 17. We don't know who's going to go off in each week of the playoffs. Last year, I think week 15, it was Goff and Baker Mayfield were the 2 highest quarterbacks. And yes, can you get there on a 2 quarterback build? Sure. But you're giving yourself a third out in playoffs to hit that like net stack. And so I like it for that reason too. So I'm going to continue that and be overweight that. I'm not going to do it in every single build, and especially the ones where I do spend high capital. I'm not going to do it in every single build, but I'm going to do it at a very high percentage, especially compared to the field. And I also will remind people that while I do 3 quarterbacks, I am very cautious and cognizant of my total capital spent, right? It's like anything else. It's early or often, not both. And so, yeah, if I'm taking like a Josh Allen, and because he runs a lot and provides to me, I am shocked he hasn't been injured, but provides and does have an injury risk, then maybe I'm getting 2 later round guys, but with upside, like I'm just making this up, like a Josh Allen. I don't even know if these bye weeks check out, by the way, like a Josh Allen, Will Levis, Bryce Young, something along those lines, where then my capital is kind of more spread out. Or, Dak and Love are some of my favorite quarterbacks to take in that like 7th, 8th range. Maybe I do like a Dak Prescott, an Aaron Rodgers, and a Will Levis. I keep saying Will Levis because I do love the Titan stack. So these are just examples that I'm still cautious of the total capital spent. Okay, so then number 2 point of what I think worked well for me last year is, yes, we are in the era that zero RB is so popular and has worked really, really well the last 2 years. Well, the thing is, there's only been a few things that have worked all 4 years. I recommend checking out Hayden Winks' article on Underdog Network. There's been some years where zero RB has been terrible. There's been some years where, obviously robust RB is terrible. What has worked for all 4 years is keeping pace at receiver. So no matter what build you do, I keep going back to Hayden Winks' article about what has worked all 4 years in BBM, but also like different strategies that he has seen work and pacing your picks at certain positions. And for running back and receiver, actually what's worked all 4 years is to have at least 3 running backs by round 10 and 5 receivers by round 10. So I like keeping a pace, like 3 receivers by 6, 4 by 7, 5 by 9, 10 at the very latest. And I think if you keep that pacing, you can do any build you want. You could do hero RB, double hero RB, elite tight end, elite quarterback. You couldn't do all those, but you could mix in all these different builds. You just have to keep that wide receiver pacing. Am I going to do zero RB builds? Yes. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm probably going to do more of those in August when I have more running back information. But I'm not going to be shy about the hero running backs because, listen, especially the top 3 running backs, I love all of them. I can see them all being league winners, or the guys that could just, be amazing for advance rate and in playoffs. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall. I'm high on all of them. And so I'm going to have heavy exposure to them. And then there's kind of like some, delayed hero running back situations in rounds 2 or 3 that I'm fine with too. I was taking a lot of a chain in Kyron Williams. I backed off that a little. I'm still taking a lot of Saquon Barkley. Now he's starting to fall. And then in the 3rd round, Derrick Henry, he could absolutely have the most touchdowns this season on the Ravens. So, I like those kind of hero builds, getting at least 1 anchored in the first 3 rounds. And then finally, the last thing that I really felt worked for me last 2 years, and I'm going to keep doing, is team stacks, not just a quarterback and receiver. And that means whether it's with or without the quarterback, I'm not afraid. I just want team correlation. I want to make bets on good teams. I just wrote an article. Again, check out all our articles on fanspeak.com are free. Check out the recent article on 10 teams I'm highest stacking on. Of course, I'm going to stack other teams, but these are the 10 teams I'm highest stacking on for various reasons in expensive, mid-price, and value tier. And I just like team correlation, stacking up good teams with or without the quarterback. So that is what I'm going to focus on a lot. In the draft Steve and I just had, we had Pickens, we took Najee Harris. I mean, that's just making a bet that the Steelers could outperform their ADP in this new offense with Russell Wilson at quarterback. So those are the kind of bets you're making when you are just correlating team stacks with or without the quarterback. And then when I have the quarterback and I'm stacking up the quarterback, it doesn't just have to be like two of his receivers. In fact, I like mixing in the running back. I love mixing in the tight end. It can be quarterback tight end. It could be quarterback receiver tight end. It could be quarterback running back tight end. My favorite build actually, and what was on my BBM3 finals roster was a Cowboys stack with Dak, Ezekiel Elliott. Actually, I think it was like Michael Gallup and then Dalton Schultz. So, if you get quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, that was my favorite build on the Lions last year, especially when those you're soaking up all the touchdown equity on that team by getting the running back, the quarterback, a receiver, tight end, and then you're usually able to spread the draft capital out too. So again, like stacking up the quarterback from multiple positions, not just receiver, and find like taking like running back, receiver, running back, tight end, even if I don't have the quarterback. So team correlation. So those are the things that matter most to me this draft season. Those are the things that I learned my lessons I want to prove on. These are the things that I think I did well and I want to continue. Again, I'm going to remind myself of this every single month of draft season because I think it's important during draft season. You can just get into so much content, into just ripping through drafts. And I want to remind myself of these very important things every single month of draft season. You can check out these articles on the Best Ball headquarters on fanspeak.com. You can find under the strategy hub. So I hope you found this helpful. Again, if you, are watching this, we would appreciate you like this episode. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to the Fanspeak Network. We're doing 4 live drafts every week. And again, more strategy shows and shorts like this. And again, check out all our articles on fanspeak.com. So this has been fun. Look for more of this great content on Fanspeak Network, on fanspeak.com. I'm Meg, and you can find me on Twitter at Megs08DFS. But thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next time.